I like to look at the comments before creating these videos just to as a quick double check. And honestly, I sometimes learn information from those comments myself. So it's really a valuable experience. But today's comments surprised me. In fact, it told me that this was such a controversial topic, I might need to actually put a helmet on to protect myself from the impact that might come in the subsequent comments from my opinion on this subject. So that's why I'm wearing this helmet to start it out. Hopefully the impacts will have subsided by now and I can take it. Oh man, that really trashed my hair. Yikes, look at that. Anyways, the knowledge bite for today touches a very interesting area. It's highly relevant from what I believe as far as a area that is often could be used, and maybe it's under leveraged, to be honest. But ultimately, it gives us developers a little more control than perhaps we thought we had. In this knowledge bite, we ask a question and we provide 3 answers that are all fairly plausible that will help us hone our understanding of Adobe Commerce. If you haven't already heard of SwiftOtter before, we build training for Adobe Commerce, but also we are e-commerce developers ourselves. So we live and we breathe the material that we put out. Very practical. This question was created by one of our developers, Isaac Phillips, very smart individual who has experienced this very question in real life, I believe, in the last week or so. So these questions are highly practical and very personal. Let's jump in to the question itself. You are reviewing some existing work in Adobe Commerce. You see several calls to ObjectManager in the code. In the interest of best practices, which of the following instances do you leave as is without requesting a change? We have 3 answers right now. In checkout success.html, in subscription popup.html, or in datafactory.php. Now, most of us have been well trained to say Object Manager should never be seen in the code. But is that really true? Should we ever see Object Manager in the code? The point I'm going to bring up today is there is a nuance, a special situation that I believe is, again, underutilized, and it warrants a usage of Object Manager. Is this something we're going to be doing every single day? No, but it's part of your architectural toolbox that I think will improve the quality of the code of your projects. So let's take a look at how our Object Manager in the first place is used. So I have in generated code, dropping down to SwiftOtter, model, product detail factory, we have our auto-generated class. Magento creates this for us. It's pretty self-explanatory. Occasionally we'll need to go blow these up. Otherwise, they pretty much live as is. You'll see Object Manager is injected here, and it has one call, create. We use these factories all the time. So it's like, in this case, we inject product detail factory. We create, we load the data in there, then we pass it off to a repository. In this case, is a data object to be saved or persisted into the database. But here we have this, in this case, we have this Object Manager create. We are passing in a class and then data. What this means is the class name is flexible. So I'm kind of giving away the answer here, but to be honest, the answer is pretty obvious. If we go back to our questions here, we see an Object Manager in checkout success.html. What this tells me is that the developer didn't know how to, or perhaps, dare I say, too lazy to create a view model, inject the order repository interface into that view model, and then provide an opportunity to load that or expose it into this checkout success.html file. So this is very poorly written code because, again, we should be using a view model in this case instead of using directly accessing Object Manager. Now, you might say, well, what's the difference? I mean, at the end of the day, a order interface being loaded in, which we shouldn't be calling load on the order model anyways, but that's beside the point. What's the difference? Like, why can't we do that? Yeah, sure, it's just some syntax difference. A good e-commerce developer is going to be progressing towards, I'm not saying 100% of the time, but going to be progressing towards testing as much as possible, as reasonably possible. And again, it's not going to be 100% probably forever, but there's going to be these critical business logic scenarios that need to be tested. And so as we're working to implement testing ourselves, we can write immediately, starting now, testable code. Injecting ObjectManager into checkout.success.html is not testable code. Inside a view model, we can actually then write an integration test, or you could do unit test too, to verify that this order repository interface does return an order using an order mocked object. So this is testable by using view model. It is not testable by using the HTML. Additionally, PHP Storm's gotten a little better with the Magento plugin, but there historically has been very, just non-existent code completion. So we could be writing errors in our code, and the static analysis that tools just don't work when using ObjectManager. In that case, that is another problem. And the nice aspect of using the factory like Magento provides is we have type hinting, and ultimately we could, annotations, and ultimately if we were writing a factory ourselves, oopsie, I should be pulling up my computer here. If we were writing a factory ourselves, we could specifically type hint this out as an interface that this subscribes to. So there is plenty of opportunity here to improve how this works. And this does not happen by injecting ObjectManager into a PHTML file. The second option here is actually fairly similar. No reason in the world to do this. This should be done through a view model. And the nice thing about a view model is and specifically in this context where we're calling out a store configuration value, we could ultimately can be reused. And this is a huge benefit as well. You can create modular or small view models, put code in there that would be reused in these different granular packages, and then you can inject it into any number of templates that you'd ever like to do it. There is yet another win. So A is axed. It is not a good option here. B is axed. It is not a good option here. Now, C is where we get into this interesting situation. A potentially custom factory. This might be something that you have never utilized before. And to be honest, you can be a great Magento developer and never utilize a factory. However, there are some cases where putting classes into a separate location can be helpful. For example, into an XML file. In doing a scenario like this, we have to be able to load it up from a variable. Now, this also could technically be if we have an interface, like a data interface, and we want to pass in specific types of implementing classes. This also could be another situation where we pass in a value and we return an interface back, and that value determines which class is actually instantiated to be able to deal with these the results that are necessary. Kind of a rudimentary level, but perhaps this is cache storage, and we want to hide whether this is Redis or file caching, terrible caching anyways, but like we want to prevent the calling aspects of this from being able to see what's happening behind the scenes. In this case, we do need flexibility with what classes are created, and we could call this in, we could add each one of these factories into our constructor, or we can use ObjectManager in that type of a scenario to call these out. It is very important, though, that we still retain static analysis through this process. So if one way this can look is jumping here into our public method create. Let's say I copied this class out, which you can do. Copy it out. I like to clean it up a bit. I don't like the underscores here, etc. But clean it up a little bit, and then you can return. Let's double check. Product detail implements product detail interface. And let's say there were some decisions that you needed to make. Make sure that product detail interface, we'll simplify that out, is the return type. So static analysis works at this point, but then we can create it. So we have our instance name, and then we have our data. So we could change the instance value to be a different type of class, depending on maybe the input data, or maybe we can add another parameter. There's been a number of cases where I have created these custom factories, and it has greatly reduced the load in the constructor, which then gives me a little bit more control and flexibility into the future for how this system is built out. Again, this is not something you're going to be doing every day, but I hope to provide a little bit extra insight or light as far as the possibilities or the capabilities that this brings. So with this, we can see that Data Factory is the only potential, I'm not saying it is guaranteed to be the only potential utilization of Object Manager in the code. Now, again, we had a bit of a typo. This should have been create, not get. Now, I want to make this as simple as possible. I think we can boil this down. Check this out. You can use Object Manager in a custom factory. Ultimately, a custom factory is simply a copy and a modification of a generated factory, the templates that Adobe Commerce brings with it. So we can use it in that to simplify the creation process of a custom list of classes. Again, I think we have to make sure that we are type hinting the results out of this just to make sure there's no ambiguity for static analysis such that weird errors can start popping up. We don't want those errors at all. However, outside of this, anywhere else, anything else you see Object Manager, it is strictly invalid. It is bad practice. It is not good to do. So don't make that mistake of doing that yourself. And if you see it, take the extra little bit of time, probably not much more than a half an hour, probably less than that, to clean the code out of those templates, or honestly, I see them in PHP files too, outside of the factory context. Clean it out, and then as best you can, reach around and pat yourself on the back for making great code. See you next week.